Welcome everyone. Can you hear me? All right, some shadows here. We got Tommy Kobo. What's up? Said I am from Canada and they went ahead last month and double jabbed the 12 plus age. Other countries stopped because of heart inflammation. Canada doubled down. We'll get into that. Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. That part's going to be a Rockfin exclusive segment. What's Trudeau doing here? It has to do with what I'm going to talk about in terms of myocarditis. That will be explained in the Rockfin exclusive segment. That will be the last segment of today. Tommy Koble said the 2 top people that pass or fail vaccines in the U.S. quit after they advised not give them children, but politicians overrode their choice. Wow. Yulu, what's up? Said, I am surprised more people are not worried about this. It keeps me from wanting to get the vaccine. Again, we're going to look at that in the Rockfin exclusive segment. Just get, Love Tagore saying, just get it. Here you have the freedom to voice your opinion, even if I disagree with it. Notaries gave a bunch of hearts. Welcome, Notary. Emblem Fate. AOC gave money to JustDems again. Water is wet news, sadly. Some folks are too brainwashed to see corruption. So this is water is wet news for some of us, you know, like Emblem Fate, you know, and myself, and other people. But there's still some people who tune into the show that this news is not water is wet news. So I have to find a balance. And I also am going to make it worthwhile to people like you who know, you know, who understand this is something obvious and not surprising, so that we can understand what to do next and how we can communicate this information to people who don't find this to be water is wet news. And then for those people that are learning about this, they'll understand better. It'll become more obvious for them, and they'll also learn what to do next after learning this. What's up, Shadowban? You're going to like this first segment. Keel Jones said, we have tons of quacks in the medical profession pretending the natural immunity isn't as good as a vax. You would think that they would be championing natural immunity since that's what vax and jabs are based off of. Troy says, loud and clear. So does Keel Jones. So last time when I had on Kamali and Rob, I think I sounded a bit too loud. So I just wanted to check to make sure I'm not sounding the same. All right, let's wait for a couple more people to trickle in and we can get started here. Steve Cutler, what's up, buddy? Said people omit the most basic aspects of vaccines. The fact that only the most at risk are ever supposed to get vaccinated, not the entire world. So I do want to give a shout out to Steve Cutler. He does amazing art. So does Lucky. Lucky is also in the chat here. Tai G, Frank, okay, yeah, this one right here. It's important to not sound crazy when discussing crazy topics. Yeah, that is a good point. Whoops, echo. I mean, I try to sound calm when I discuss these topics. I'm like, hey, you know, look at this evidence. But I also have to find a balance where I'm not sounding too monotone or too boring, right? I don't think I sound crazy, but it's still really relative, right? Some people will think I sound crazy because they're so brainwashed by the mainstream narrative. No matter how calm I sound, they'll still think I'm crazy. All right, so let's get started then. What's up, everybody? How's it going? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. I was motivated by one of my colleagues, Rob Durden, who does his top 10, top 5 videos, uplifting other channels, and I wanted to do the same. I wanted to do a top 10 list uplifting certain underappreciated and underrated individuals who do a lot of extensive research, who collaborate a lot to this show and to other shows, and who have their own channels. Some of them have their own channels. A lot of them have their own outlets in which they write a lot of articles. These are very informative people who are putting in a lot of work, and I wanted to show some appreciation for these individuals. Some of these individuals, okay, so the individuals who I'm going to list are, again, they're underrated. They're not going to be people that have, tens of thousands of followers or subscribers on Twitter or YouTube. So let's get started with that list. And when I cut this segment off, I'm going to have in the description a list where you can follow them and where you can show support. And this list, the order is in no particular order. All right, it's in no particular order. It's not like, this is the best and this is no, that's not how it is. Number 1, my friend Shadowban Refugee. He does a lot of great work digging into the legislation, which is pages and pages long. I'm going to have him on the show tomorrow to talk about the reconciliation bill. There's so many pages. There are so many things to discuss. He's been on Pasta's show discussing the environmental factors that are discussed in the legislation, and how this is furthering the agenda of the oligarchs to continue to destroy the planet. He collaborates a lot with some of the other people that I'm going to mention on this list, and you guys will see him tomorrow when I have him on the show. We're going to further discuss the reconciliation bill. What else? He's been on the show before. He's really high energy, and he's going to start his own channel in which he digests and analyzes this legislation. It's important for us to understand what's in these bills, and so that we're not misguided by bills that sound progressive, right? Which leads me to the next 2 people that I'm going to list here. Number 2 is Seb Solomon, and number 3 is Ali Alexandra. Ali Alexandra is a member of the MCSC network as well. Seb Solomon and Ali Alexandra I've had on the show multiple times already. Seb Solomon has dug into how crypto is affecting countries in Africa. Cryptocurrencies such as Cardano, and how they're abusing children in countries like Ethiopia. So they're taking advantage of this new thing, right, to continue acts of imperialism on these countries. Ali Alexandra, I've had both of them on to discuss the most recent Medicare for All bill, 1976, and how it's a value-based system, which really shows us how we're not going to get much accomplished even if we get such bills passed, as long as we don't have the current ruling class in power. Because as long as they're in power, and as long as these lobbyists are writing our legislation, they're going to get things in there that's going to benefit them more than it's going to benefit us, the people. So if you haven't checked out that interview that I had with both of them, definitely check that out. I'll have that linked in the description, as well as places where you can support their work. Number 4 on the list is Jack Sith. My brother has been following me since over a year. He gave me a lot of information regarding Crystal Ball and her past. He does a lot of follow the money research. He looked into where Crystal's money would come from when she formed her PAC. And I had him on the show last week to talk about cryptocurrency. And I know that he collaborated a lot with Seb Solomon, in which, helped her open her eyes about cryptocurrency and helped motivate her to write some of her articles that exposes some truths about cryptocurrency. And if you haven't checked out that latest interview that I did with Jack Sith, you should definitely check that out. There's a lot of things that people in independent media are not talking about regarding cryptocurrency. We answered your questions on that, and I made another community post. If you guys have any further questions regarding cryptocurrency, Jack Sith can help answer those, and I'll have him back on the show. And regardless, I'm going to have him back on the show because it's a really deep topic to cover. we got to understand how the ruling class is trying to use cryptocurrency to co-opt ways in which people are trying to opt out of the system. Number 5 on this list is the Yellow Brick Road. This consists of Jordan. He's the main host of the show. And also James, aka OCB, who's also a part of the Yellow Brick Road. They do a lot of deep dives and psychoanalysis on individuals and independent media. And just any media in general, actually. But a lot of their videos are regarding people that you guys know from independent media, trying to see who's authentic, who's inauthentic, or who is slipping up here and not seeing certain things in their analysis. I highly recommend checking that out. I want to have Jordan on the show for more discussions regarding psychology and spirituality, because the only way that we're going to have a better world is if we continue to increase consciousness, if we continue to have more self-awareness. And I'm glad that that's what Jordan and James are trying to do with their channel on the Yellow Brick Road. Because let's say that the current ruling class is replaced. How do we know that we're not going to make the same mistakes as them? Also, what's the most efficient way that we can do it, right? Is a revolution going to be super destructive when we if we try to take out the current establishment that we have? Will it be counterproductive? Will it just end up costing a bunch of lives? These are things that the Yellow Brick Road discusses. It's also a fun community and relaxing. It's not the only thing that they talk about. They also talk about other issues that are happening in pop culture. It's a really fun, relaxing place, and you learn a lot about psychology on the Yellow Brick Road. Next up on the list here, we have Marcus Cage. This is an individual who I've had on the show multiple times. He's really knowledgeable on history. Some of his videos have really opened my mind. I have some of them listed on my favorites. There's one about how we are living in the Matrix. His channel, the video, he has 3 channels. The one that I just meant, the one that has the video that I just mentioned is called The Political Matrix. He also has Hebrew Apologetics and What I've Been Thinking with Marcus Cage. He's really knowledgeable on history, and when he comes on, he blows my mind with his analysis. As well as the other hosts who I have on when I have these panel discussions, they're also like, damn, like Marcus is so knowledgeable on these issues. Go ahead and give that guy a follow on those 3 channels that he has and support his work. He's doing amazing work. Number 7, we have Ramiro Sebastian Funes. Ramiro has been traveling to countries like Nicaragua and other countries as well to study the history of those countries that are in the global south. And he also exposes imperialism on his show. He has a socialist perspective. I highly recommend checking out his work. He has on a lot of guests. It's great to hear, these perspectives from people in the global south, so that we can understand what exactly the U.S. is doing to oppress these nations and what they've been doing for decades. Next up, we have number 8, Charles Anderson. Charles Anderson of the Lone Wolf Podcast. This is someone who I've been collaborating with for over a year. When I first got started, when I was at like 100, 200 subscribers, I had him on. The first new content that I have on this channel, because I used to be a part of another channel, and then, I uploaded some of the videos that I had from that channel onto this channel. The first new content that I had on this channel was with Charles, and he has a perspective from people. He gives a perspective that not a lot of other commentators can give, since a lot of commentators especially like the old guard, like people like Kyle, people like Jimmy, people like Humanist Report, and all these people. And I'm not saying that Jimmy is the same as Kyle and Mike in this regard. I'm just saying based on where they are from, like in these liberal states, Charles is from a more conservative state, like from the South. He's able to give a perspective from there, and it helps us understand better on like, okay, what do we have in common with some of these people that see through the establishment and consider themselves independent? What do we have in common with these people? So yeah, he just formed a network too. Charles has been putting in a lot of work. He also is just now, he's now on Rockfin, so you can support his work there. Highly recommend him. He's been on the show several times already. Number 9, we have my boy Propaganda, aka Quinn Peterson. Quinn Peterson, he's been an activist for Assange for a long time, for many years. His channel, Propaganda Live, he goes over videos that not a lot of people look at. He looks at a lot of documents. He looks at the Vault 7 documents. And he also has fun by playing games and stuff, giving a more relaxed mood to all this, to like when he's breaking down these really because when you look at documents like Vault 7, right, it's like, oh my god, it's like it sounds boring, right, breaking down all these topics, but he does it in a way where he's playing games, or he gives a really comedic tone, and it's not boring. Some of that information is still horrifying to learn, and it is important to learn, but it's not in a doom and gloom perspective. He's also been on the show several times. And number 10 is Dontel of Unapologetic. I highly recommend checking Dontel out if you have not yet. We're going to discuss an article that he wrote in this next segment. He's been, like, before I even had my channel, I was watching Dontel, aka Unapologetic, and he was opening my eyes to the hypocrisy of the Young Turks and the Justice Democrats. He's still doing that, doing amazing work. Again, we're going to go over his article, his most recent article that he wrote on his Substack, about how AOC and the Justice Democrats just paid $13 million to DNC consulting firms since 2019. And I believe that his channel is shadow banned. Like, he's been around for a long time, but because of that shadow ban, he hasn't been able to have much growth. So I wanted to give a shout out to him so he can show support and help his channel grow. Yes, Choosy. Yeah, Prop is a master musician. All right, so let me just let you guys know what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk about that article I was just telling you guys that Dontel wrote, and I'm gonna discuss with you guys the importance of self-awareness, and being aware, and being politically aware. How some people have the first or only have the second. And it's rare to find people who have both. And then for the Rockfin exclusive segment, I'm going to talk to you guys about myocarditis. Myocarditis and how that's a side effect of these vaccines. Yes, Lucky. Steve Cutler does live music streams as well. You guys should check out his channel as well. So I'll give some more top 10 shout outs in future videos. All right, Choosy said, it's official. Katie, Chris Hedges, and Marianne Williamson let me down pretty much. I'm grown tired of their indifference. So what are you referring to, Choosy, are you talking about their indifference regarding the COVID narrative and the vaccines? So Steve Cutler is streaming later tonight. Yeah, I'll try to make that. I'm feeling a little tired. I had to wake up at 5 a.m. today to drive to work. So I am feeling a little sleepy. But regardless, the show must go on. And we will analyze these segments. All right, let's get started with this next segment then. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. So AOC and the Justice Democrats, unsurprisingly to a lot of you, but to other people, this may not be so surprising. We do get some newcomers that find this channel. There's also, some casual viewers that don't watch all the videos here. This is still important to know, even if it is water is wet news, so that you can have more evidence to give people who don't know what's going on with the Justice Democrats and why we're not getting the change that we need via electoral politics. They're paying money, pretty much. They're paying money to maintain the system as it is. So, Unapologetic, Dontel of Unapologetic wrote an article discussing this, and I'm going to share that for you guys right now. So he has a new article on his Substack and said, normally we look at the money coming into camps as an indicator of how they will perform. This time, where the money's going is the most revealing. AOC paid $1.4 million to a marketing firm to run her online store. So it's about branding to these people. So it's about branding themselves with slogans like Medicare for all and tax the rich, but then not actually getting anything done. Is that how we get Medicare for all? Why not write legislation like you're supposed to do? You're a legislator. Why aren't you doing that? Right? Oh, man. So this article starts out by saying, in politics, we learned that following. Okay. So that's a little bit of what he wrote in the tweet earlier. So he said, after going through FEC filing and open secrets and totaling money that went directly to consultants, Justice Democrats, which include Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, Ilhan Omar, and AOC, gave a total of $13 million to DNC consultants over the last 3 years. The politicians who solicited millions in donations, explicitly promising to dismantle the corporate influence in the Democratic Party, plan to do it by dumping $13 million into the nexus of corporate influence consulting firms. So these individuals here, they found a niche in how they can raise money by saying that they're going to fix the problem. But then if the problem is actually fixed, they have nothing to keep running on. And so they have to have this grift where they say, look at all this corruption that these corporate politicians are doing. We, as the Justice Democrats, have to replace these people. But then when they get in, they start endorsing people like Nancy Pelosi, who they're supposed to be fighting against and replacing. They're not actually getting anything done. And then they vote for these bills that are written by these lobbyists that further empower the ruling class. At this point, I don't know what to tell you if you still support the Justice Democrats and still think that they're going to change the country. That you must not have the best critical thinking skills. And that's the nicest way that I can put it. So let's read a bit further into what is mentioned here. So it says, the fact that they are willing to invest this amount of money into the shady infrastructure of the party enters a major question. If they aren't funded by corporations, right? Because they say that they're funded by the people, which there's many evidence that shows that that's not necessarily the case. But what's mentioned here is why won't they ever challenge leadership to advance the policies they ran on? And just to add on to what Dontel said, why does leadership allow them to have protests like being in front of the Capitol steps? Right, the police wasn't arresting AOC or Cori Bush, but they were arresting other people who were protesting during Occupy Congress, people who aren't politicians. And these police officers get instructions, they get orders from Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. The Justice Democrats, or the JustDems, I like the abbreviation that Dontel gives there. They're JustDems, right? They use our political donations as their buy-in to the corrupt but always profitable political machine. So this is the definition of grifting. Raising money to maintain the status quo as opposed to changing it. Yes, political consultants are the swamp, right? They give advice, they give horrible advice to these Democrats so that they can remain moderate, right? So that they can remain moderate. We saw that with Nina Turner. We saw that with Bernie Sanders. They're like, oh no, you don't want to scare off some potential voters. But if they start acting too moderate, then the people that you're trying to appeal to in that case will say, well, if you're trying to be like a moderate, why don't I just vote for the actual moderate? Why don't I just vote for the Pete Buttigieg? Or why don't I just vote for the Kamala Harris? Why do I have to vote for this Bernie Sanders, who I perceive as radical, but he's trying to sound moderate to try to gain my vote? But I can just, I'm a moderate. I'm just going to vote for a moderate. That's how these people think. It's so counterproductive, but it might be all by design. It might be all by design, seeing this rise in people that actually want change, these younger people that want change. Most of them are younger. And getting their hopes up. It's no different from professional wrestling. It's political wrestling. So it makes you think, right? Bernie Sanders this entire time, he was just participating in professional wrestling. So it's time for us to see through that and start investing more in community organizing and mutual aid, in direct action events, and ways that you can find places to invest your money in. Like if you consider yourself somebody who wants to actually change the system, donating to politicians is not going to cut it anymore. So stop donating to politicians, invest in community organizing, mutual aid, invest in yourself. Invest in self-help books or just in any other book. Right? That's money better spent than spending it on these politicians. So yeah, talk to people in your Discord, your Twitter, or other online communities about where you can invest your money for community organizing. Do not donate to co-opted movements like the Sunrise Movement or 350.org. I have videos that expose Sunrise and 350.org. You can check out the work of Robbie Yeager, exposing where their money comes from. Their money comes from the people that we're supposed to be fighting against, like George Soros and all these other people. Check out Cory Morningstar's work on The Wrong Kind of Green for more information on how these movements are co-opted and are bought off by big green billionaires. And like I said, spending money on a book is more worthwhile than donating to a politician who won't change anything for us. Now, there is something else that I want to highlight from this article that Dontel wrote. So he said, chicanery with DNC consultants isn't new. People should have learned their lesson already 4 years ago. So he said, don't believe me. I'm not the only one who thinks there's something foul going on. The Democratic Party and their political operatives who run these consultant firms, Nomiki Konst, who was part of the DNC Reform Commission and got an inside look at the extraordinary sums of money that were being given to a handful of consultants. Now, Nomiki Konst, she still supports Justice Democrats and she tries to kneecap direct action events now. So she knows better, for people who know her stances on still supporting these politicians. She knows better. So the peak of her popularity online was when a clip was being circulated of her lambasting other members of the DNC for the brazen corruption. In 2016, between $700 million to $800 million was spent on 5 consulting firms just to ultimately lose the House, Senate, and White House to Trump. During the golden era of high-priced consultants, Democrats lost over 1,200 seats at all levels of government. So they lost the House, the Senate, and the White House. Now we finally have that, and we're not getting anything done that's actually going to benefit people's lives. So what's the excuse now? Getting legislation like Build Back Better, which is legislation that's going to lead us to the Great Reset, which is advancing capitalism, which is going to further oppress us, surveil us. It's a pathway towards digital IDs so that the ruling class that we're supposed to be fighting against can keep track of you, to make sure that we don't rise up. Considering all the advantages these incumbents have that I've gone over before, I have a hard time believing AOC spent $1.4 million on a clothing line because she thought that will protect her seat from a challenger. I'm unconvinced that Ilhan Omar really believes $2.9 million to her husband's media consulting firm is what will keep her in Congress fighting the good fight. If Pramila Jayapal believes in giving a DNC consulting firm $900,000 to run Medicare for All ads move the needle at all on single payer, I have a bridge to sell her. If the old adage that money is power is true, then the overpaid consultant class of the Democratic Party are second only to the donors in maintaining the corporate capture of the party. So once again, they're grifting to maintain their brand, to maintain their career, and keep people's hopes up. That's all it is. They are celebrities. To keep this image, they're actors and actresses that perform in front of cameras to make it look like they are heroes fighting for you. It's all a grift, guys. And you know this. And for people who are just learning this, now you know. And you're not alone, and I know you'll stay informed. All right, so let's go over some shout outs here. Ty G said Assange exposed the pinpoint nanotech system right before he got removed from the embassy. That's right. Three-chord grifter, I don't recommend that on heroin. I just don't think you should spend your money on either. Either way, you're causing harm to yourself. That's what they're saying for the Great Reset, right? You will own nothing and you will be happy. They said I already own nothing and I am happy. You can find happiness now, guys. Part of what I'm going to talk about next will keep your mind clear. The more you have yourself in check, your own house in check, the more clear things will be. And the better you can communicate with other people so you can engender change in this country. Change that will actually benefit us. Before we move on, I wanted to show you guys this. I thought this was really hilarious. Since we're talking about AOC, like, we talk about how these individuals are actors and actresses, and then when they get on camera to try to explain themselves, we're like, oh, why did you vote for this imperialist policy that, you know, that gives money to Israel for their dome, for their Iron Dome? And they give word salad answers. Like when I was in front of the Capitol and then AOC was giving her speech and she was going like, yeah. And she wasn't saying anything. She was just saying a bunch of words that when you tried to like really listen closely and try to understand what the sentence is saying, it's not really anything. It sounds like this. Let me put the volume up so you can hear this.
And yet,
1 second. Whoops. Hang on a second. Let me zoom in a little more.
and yet readily marginalizing that intersectionality. It's very profound. These conversations are intrinsically multifaceted, right? There are different angles to be looking at this from, and it's crucial to juxtapose that contrast within those realms of varying perspectives. And it's sort of the case where, are we asking ourselves the right questions, or are we all just sort of victim to the cause itself? It's suffocating, to be quite frank. It's paralyzing. But having these conversations is extremely, extremely vital in fundamental change, and being able to sort of step back and look at this from a bird's eye view and not just a worm's eye view. And that, of course, begs the ever-aching question of whose bird is this, right? And yet readily marginal.
Whose bird is this? Oh my goodness. So yeah, I said I try to sound like how this guy and how AOC sounds over here. I said, this complex yet fascinatingly vital video leaves one's perspective perplexed for reasons known and unknown. Right, AOC in front of the Capitol. We're here for reasons known and unknown. What a joke. Troy, whose bird is this? All right, so this next segment is sort of like a revision to a segment that I had that wasn't clipped up that I did about 2 weeks ago when I talked about what the difference between an influencer and a reporter is. And I discussed this with Nico, and this kind of made me revise a little bit more on what my original analysis on this was. So the two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. A reporter can be an influencer, and an influencer can also be a reporter sometimes. Like, for example, Jimmy Dore, he reports the news sometimes, but he's also like an influencer. But let's define those two real quick. So what do we have here? So an influencer has the power to change the culture. Like, they do this with on the platform that they're on, right? On Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever the case may be. And a reporter, they have the power to report the culture, right? They tell us what is going on. And some people do wait for their favorite influencers to say something about a topic and then make up their minds based on what they say. And a reporter reports on information that people can take, and then people can take of it what they will, and then they can go deeper into that information to confirm or refute it. In both cases, it's important for us to do our own research and not just follow personalities. We should be committed to the truth, and that requires us doing our own research. So it's important for us to not be idolizing personalities. Like I said, I think this is seen more with the influencers. Joe Rogan is an influencer, right? Some people do like he's not necessarily reporting things. He's more so like taking in information and then giving his opinion on it, and then some people are influenced by his opinion. But like I said, if we are committed to the truth, we won't just stop there. Like, it gives us a perspective. Like, that's how influencers should be looked at, right? As just a perspective that we look at, and then we can be like, okay, like, I understand that perspective. Now here's where my perspective may be similar, may be different. And this is based on the information that I have now, that I have gathered up to this point. And I will continue to dig deeper into this topic. I will continue to look at more information. And that information that you're gathering is provided by reporters. Originally, I did say that the difference between an influencer and a reporter is integrity, but that's not necessarily a case. There can be influencers that have integrity, and then vice versa, right? There's influencers that don't have integrity, and then there's reporters that can have integrity, and there's reporters that don't have integrity. So it's not, we see the case in both, in reporters and in influencers. Like, we see it all the time in people who are supposed to report the news in mainstream media, and a lot of them now, unfortunately, in independent media. Some of them, are grifting and don't have really much integrity. And you can see that if you watch videos like The Yellow Brick Road, where he analyzes authenticity in some of these people like Steven Crowder, and even in some people that you guys may like, right? Like Joe Rogan, like he may have some slip-ups sometimes. So it's important for us to keep our eyes open when we look at information that's being provided to us on these platforms that we enjoy listening and watching. So yeah, with that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section here, in the chat. Oh, I will say, pay attention to some people who may change their position based on the current wave that's happening. Some of these people are not authentic about their positions. They may be only taking a position because they see in the sphere that they're in, the popular position is something, and then they may take on that position even though that's not actually how they really feel. They're only doing it for clout. Some people have even admitted it, that they only do things for clout, that that's the only way that they operate. Like, for example, now, before, it wasn't a popular position to be against, mandates, to be open about these the scientific evidence shown about masks and about vaccines that go against the mainstream narrative. For a long time, a lot of independent content creators were going along with the mainstream narrative, but now more are seeing through it, thankfully. But let's see who is going to change their position inauthentically based on how they see some of these popular people in this sphere that we're in, this anti-imperialist independent media left sphere that we're in. Now that Jimmy's speaking out about this, now that Max Blumenthal is speaking out about this, now that they are talking more about the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, whereas before, some of these people were dismissing it like it's not important at all, or we're calling this like a conspiracy smoothie. Let's see if their position changes inauthentically just to grift off of the popular wave. Like, they just stick their finger out. Where's the wind blowing? That's the direction that I'm going to go. We especially see that with politicians. Prime example from the primaries. Elizabeth Warren. She put her finger out, she looked at which way the wind was blowing, and then she'd go in the direction in which where all the energy was at, which was Bernie Sanders, but she wanted to still maintain a little bit of her moderateness, so she didn't go too far. But she would try to use that language that Bernie Sanders would use about Medicare for all and all that. But if you actually paid attention and looked at what her actual platform is, and certain key words that she would use, like access, not single payer, but she would say access to healthcare. I mean, we have access to mansions, but do we have the money for it? Does everybody get a mansion? No, but we have access to it. We just can't obtain it. Same thing when these politicians say access to healthcare or access to all these other things that we need. So yeah, I would love to know what your thoughts are in the chat. Taiji said, Frank, I think you should check out this page as soon as possible. Transhumanistparty.org. What the heck is that, man? That sounds crazy. Transhumanistparty.org. How can I copy and paste this from StreamYard? What the heck is that, man? Taiji. Oh, bro, I know. I remember you from Tuesday. You were talking to Ali, right? You were looking into like nanotech and all that. Yeah, I was looking at the chat. I would love to talk to you also, Taiji. What is this, man? I'm looking at it right now. Super intelligence, super longevity, super happiness towards a triple civilization. Okay, triple civilization of this. So is this a list of people who support transhumanism? Oh, no, there's like, here, let me pull this up so that you guys can see this. Very interesting, man. All right, so what do we got here? Towards a triple civilization of super intelligence, super longevity, super happiness. It reminds me of you will own nothing, you will be happy. Super intelligence, what do they mean? By implanting what, like nanotech in our brains and all that? We will live long. Why? For that push of like veganism and that food that Bill Gates is trying to fund. Like he has his hands in Impossible Burger now and in Beyond Meat. Elon Musk is here. Frank Tipler, The Future in You podcast. So are these all places that and individuals who support transhumanism? I'll look at this more, Taiji. Really interesting. Okay, so you said it's their intended end goals on the values page. They have their own Bill of Rights and the U.S. political party chapter. It's important for us to know how our enemies are operating. Ex-bootlicker. That's a funny ass name, man. Yeah, we all did used to be bootlickers at some point. We were indoctrinated to be bootlickers, and some of us have been able to grow past that, and we're no longer bootlickers. So Klaus Schwab is running for king of the world. Speaking of understanding how our enemies operate, you guys should read COVID-19 and the Great Reset by Klaus Schwab. You'll learn about his motivations for why he wants to get to the Great Reset, and how COVID-19 is an opportunity to get there. Like we definitely see how they're taking advantage of the supposed pandemic to get to the Great Reset. What did he say in that video that I put out earlier? He was like, or some people say build back better. I say, the Great Reset. Troy C, they got our IDs and money. Next, they'll want our thoughts and very souls. Oh, let's go to Rockfin and see what's going on here. 3-Chord Grifter, thank you very much for the donation. I really appreciate that. I greatly appreciate that. Oh, Ali, I don't know if you missed it, but I gave a top 10 list, and you were on it, of top 10 list of underrated individuals to support. Individuals and channels to be supporting. All right, this next segment, I don't know if I'm going to clip up this segment. It depends on how much I'm able to express what I have in my mind right now. But I think this requires more thought before I actually clip this up. This is sort of just some, how do I put it? Just like some early thoughts that I have about this topic. I should research this a little bit more, like read up a little bit more, but it is on self-awareness, like direct personal self-awareness and political awareness, political or societal or environmental awareness, and the importance of being both politically aware and self-aware. And I had a brief conversation about this with Jordan from the Yellow Brick Road, in which he said that both of them are self-awareness. Jordan, who I want to have on the show to talk about authenticity and self-awareness and the importance of being both, politically and self-aware. But he also feels like he has to think about this a little bit more before he, articulates this and expresses these into words. But they are both a part of being self-aware. You are your environment. You interact with it every day. It influences you in the way that you are. But the way that I defined it is that being environmentally, politically, or socially aware is an extension of yourself. And then the self-aware that you have, like more so in your head, like about you or the ego, how you're behaving, how you are interacting with the environment, that's what I'm calling as like more direct personal awareness. And a lot of people who practice spirituality, practice or read a lot of self-help books, read a lot of books on psychology, people who've been to therapy and learn certain techniques, people who meditate, a lot of these people are very personally self-aware. There's a lot of people that you now find online who have their channels that discuss spirituality, that discuss self-help, who are also, many of which are authors. People like Eckhart Tolle is an example. People like Ted McKenna, people like Jed McKenna. Who else we got here? People like, man, I can't remember some of these authors. People like Joseph Campbell. People like, I don't want to get the names wrong here. Ken Wilber is another one. These are people who are very interpersonally aware, spiritually aware. They're very, you could also call it environmentally aware. But when it comes to the inner workings of politics and people's intentions and what's happening behind the scenes, understanding how people are being brainwashed by the mainstream media, like exactly how they're doing that, rather than only knowing like at the surface, because there are some people that at the surface know that the media is brainwashing us, but they don't know exactly how and what they're doing behind the scenes. These people, like I said, they're very personally aware of the self, but they're not so much politically aware. It's very rare to find somebody like Eckhart Tolle or like Ken Wilber that are at the same level of political awareness as, let's say, somebody like Whitney Webb, for example. Like Whitney Webb, or I'll throw out some examples of people who I know personally, like Seb Solomon, like Ali Alexandra, like Propaganda, like Shadow Ban Refugee, like Jordan of the Yellow Brick Road, like members of the MCSC network, Nico House, Pasta. Like they won't have that level of understanding of what's going on politically. If there are people like that, they're not I mean, I haven't come across them. I don't think they're as famous as these individuals, as people like Eckhart Tolle. It's something that's really, really, really rare. But we also have some individuals, many of which are in the independent media sphere, who are politically aware to some extent, and this includes audience members who understand what's going on politically, who aren't as much spiritually aware or environmentally aware or socially aware. And it's, how do I put this in a way that doesn't sound offensive to some people? There are some people that run into problems in their social circles and they don't know how to deal with it. And it's because of these limitations of, okay, they're probably not, they're not aware of how they themselves, like what their weaknesses are, how they are pushing certain people away because of the way that they're behaving. And this is, I would say a lot of us are like this. Like I'm like this to some extent. I wouldn't say it's to the same degree as some people. But it's important to have both, right? Like I mentioned earlier, like we have to have a clear mind. We have to have, like, in a way, like, how do I put it? Like a clean house before we're able to actually change the world. Because how are you going to understand how to interact with people in a way that isn't counterproductive, in a way that isn't pushing them away? How are you going to deal with some of this information that's so depressing to hear about? Because a lot of this information is really overwhelming, and it can put you in a depressive state. You're seeing negative headline after negative headline. When you go deep into the legislation, you just feel, sometimes you can't help it and feel hopeless and be like, people are supporting this legislation that sounds progressive on the surface, but in actuality it's not. It's going to further advance the agenda of these people that we're supposed to be fighting against. And then you just look at Twitter and you see like in the reply section of something like of someone who's being demonized for questioning the narrative about Russiagate or the COVID narrative, and in the replies you see a lot of people who are brainwashed that are demonizing these people. Like I was looking at the reply section of Letita Wright, who's the actress who plays Shuri in Black Panther, and she was expressing her skepticism in the COVID jab, and a lot of people were calling her dumb and blah blah blah, etc., etc. Another example is Joe Rogan, who expressed his skepticism and people were also demonizing for him expressing his thoughts on ivermectin. And seeing that, yeah, like it does make me feel hopeless. Like I do sometimes feel like, damn, like there's so many people that are so brainwashed right now. And then it does make me feel sad. And I imagine it's the same for a lot of people. Like I see a lot of people on my Twitter feed sometimes who are really smart, really informed, and they sometimes they do put out some tweets that are calling out for help. Like they say, I feel like I'm a burden on people. I've seen people tweet out that they don't want to live anymore. Thankfully, I see other people that reach out to them and tell them, hey, I'm here if you need some help, blah, blah, blah. But if we're more psychologically aware, if we do find ways to deal with that depression, whether it be group psychology sessions, whether it be meditation, whether it be informing yourself about how dieting yourself certain ways and staying away from certain foods and exercising a certain way can release certain endorphins or release the right biochemical processes in your body that can help make you happy, you will have a clearer mind. You won't feel as overwhelmed. But like I said, a lot of this is not something that's taught to us at an early age, and it should be taught to us in school. But it's all by design. It's all by design to make us not know how to handle, our problems from our social life. Even though there's a bunch of authors coming out, there's a bunch of authors who are knowledgeable on how to deal with, how to deal with your marriage, how to deal with people, how to deal with toxic people. This stuff is written and known. Like this information is out there. It's just not distributed to the people like it should be. And now there are people like Eckhart Tolle that you can find, online, or other people that can help you deal with your depression. How to focus on being on the present moment. People like Russell Brand are trying to combine the two. Like speaking of how it's rare to see somebody who is both self-aware and politically aware, Russell Brand is one of those rare people who are both to some extent. But yeah, this is a topic I would like to look at more, and so that I can express my thoughts on this better. But right now I'm sort of thinking out loud about this. Because what a lot of these people like Eckhart Tolle, and I know I keep mentioning this individual, but there's a bunch of other, yogis and gurus and stuff that you find like online. Like you find a lot of their work online that don't understand how the ruling class is causing all this suffering. How they're limiting people's access to find this information. I had Sky Daddy on the other day that was talking about how these holistic doctors and research on holistic medication and holistic dieting is demonized, even though there's so much evidence supporting how this is a lot better than the current medicine system that we have, that's being pushed out by big pharma. So it's important to have both. All right, what do we got here? Let's look at the chat. So Troy C said, yeah, Franco, I wonder how my nearby natural food store is taking that suppression. They were always stressing holistic healing. Like all of that, I mean, that's a part of spirituality. Like, how are you going to function properly? How are you going to meditate properly? How are you going to have a good exercise if you're not medicating yourself and eating the proper food so that you can function properly, right? Brad Kale said, totally can be hard to follow. Doesn't really talk about concrete things to do to bring about interchange. So what we can do, right? Because there's still some truths that you can find in when he talks about, you know, being in the present moment and all that. We have to be integral. We have to diversify our sources, right? Just like we do with independent media. For political news, we diversify our sources. You know, this individual does a fantastic work on foreign policy. This individual does fantastic work on cryptocurrency. This individual does fantastic work on debunking the COVID narrative. Like combining all of that together so that we have a good understanding of what's going on overall. We have to do that as well with how we take care of ourselves mentally and physically. Diversify our sources. I'm gonna listen to Eckhart Tolle for, you know, how I can focus on the present moment. I can look at this source over here so that I can learn how to meditate in a good way. Like there's Kundalini meditation that this individual does, right? And then you can find another source over here that looks into holistic dieting, holistic medication, and all that. There's what else? There's another individual over here that focuses on epistemology. Another individual over here that looks at spirituality, blah, blah, blah. Like, you're diversifying your sources. And then taking what works from each source and integrating that into your understanding of how the world works. All right, guys, at this moment, all right, I want to give a shout out to JVB. Thank you very much for the Super Ray tip. I'm going to end the stream on YouTube, and we will continue the conversation over at Rockfin. I have a lot of sources to discuss with you guys. We're probably halfway done with the show. The next stuff that we're going to discuss, it's a lot of information that I want to go over. So let me go over here. And YouTube is gonna start censoring this a lot harder. Like we went over how they just came out the other day about how they're going to increase their censorship on YouTube. Facebook is trying to do the same thing. Is it a coincidence that they're doing it right after the other? Like so close in time? So in case anything happens, I've said this multiple times, you can find me on Rockfin. I also have a backup channel called Frank Analysis Backup. And if YouTube wants to delete this channel, I will continue to be on YouTube for as long as possible with as many backup channels as I can have, so that I can reach the normies and direct them to these alternative sources where they can find information. So to the YouTube people, I'll see you over on Rockfin. We're about to end the stream on YouTube.